They gave me a dry piece of bread at my sister's 5-star wedding. That was it. No wine, no entree, not even a name card at the table. Just one lonely slice on a plate that seemed to scream louder than any insult they could have spoken. My name is Claire Dawson. I am 38 years old, a photographer in Chicago, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the invisible daughter. My younger sister Emily was the golden child, the shining bride everyone adored. Our mother polished her like silver, parading her through pageants, ballet recitals, and charity galas. Me, I was always told to stand in the background, to smile without speaking, to be grateful for scraps of attention that never lasted. For years, I believed silence was survival. I worked behind my camera, capturing the truth in other people's lives, even when no one in my own family ever cared to look at mine. I lived alone in a modest apartment, editing portraits of strangers while my family sent out holiday cards where I didn't exist. Emily front and center, my parents glowing with pride, and me erased, like I had never been born. But that night, at the grandest hotel in the city, the truth of my place in their world was laid bare more cruelly than ever. When I arrived, I wasn't ushered into the golden ballroom, where 200 guests laughed over champagne. Instead, an attendant led me past the main doors, down a narrow corridor, and toward a round table set for one near the glowing red exit sign. No centerpiece, no candles, no menu, just my name scribbled on a flimsy card beside that single piece of dry bread. I sat down slowly, adjusting the emerald dress I had chosen with care, and I felt the air around me grow heavy. My mother appeared, radiant in pearls, her smile fixed for the crowd, but her words meant only for me. "This suits you, Claire." Simple, humble. Then Emily, flawless in lace and satin, drifted by like royalty, greeting her subjects. She glanced at my table, lowered her voice, and whispered the word that had followed me my entire life. Pathetic. It should have broken me. It should have sent me running to the bathroom, crying quietly like they expected. That was the role I was given. The overlooked sister. The extra chair no one wanted to acknowledge, but sitting there with that stale bread untouched on my plate, something shifted. I realized this wasn't about food. It wasn't even about this wedding. It was about decades of being dismissed, diminished, erased. And in that moment, I decided the story was going to change. Because I wasn't there just to watch my sister's perfect facade. I had come prepared. I had come with the truth. I slid my hand into my purse and closed my fingers around the small black USB resting inside. Smooth, cold, heavy, with everything they never thought I would dare reveal. And under the glittering chandeliers, while the music swelled and laughter filled the ballroom, I whispered to myself, so softly no one else could hear, "Not tonight." If you are watching this, drop a comment telling me where you are from. Hit subscribe and stay tuned to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of being the forgotten daughter. I wasn't always 38, sitting alone at my sister's wedding with dry bread on my plate. Once, I was a little girl with big eyes and a paper crown, waiting on a park bench for a birthday party that never came. I was 10 years old, wearing my best dress, holding a box of cupcakes in my lap. My mother had told me, "Just wait here, Claire. We'll be right back." So I waited. 10 minutes, 20, an hour. My hands grew sticky from the frosting melting in the sun. The paper crown slipped over my eyes. I remember scanning every corner of the park, praying a familiar face would appear. But no one came. No balloons, no laughter, no family. That day, I walked home alone on the subway, holding cupcakes no one would eat. Later, I found out where they'd gone. My mother had taken Emily to a modeling audition across town. She forgot about me entirely. Or maybe she chose to forget. Both hurt the same. It wasn't the last time. Years later, at my high school graduation, I wore a borrowed white dress. I stood at the curb after the ceremony, watching other parents hand their children roses, clapping proudly, taking photos. My hands were empty. My parents weren't there. They had gone to Emily's magazine photo shoot. When I finally made it home, my mother brushed off my disappointment with a thin smile. "We thought your graduation was tomorrow," she said, as if that erased the hollow space in my chest. "Do you know what it feels like to be cut out of your own life?" I do, and I mean that literally. I found out years later, flipping through old albums, that my parents had cropped me out of family pictures. There was Emily, smiling, perfect, my mother and father, standing tall, proud, and the edges of my sleeve or a lock of my hair, sliced away by scissors, like I had been a stain on the memory they wanted to keep. They never yelled. They never called me names. Their cruelty was quieter, polite, intentional. They erased me with silence. They pretended I wasn't there, until even I began to question if I truly was. But here's the thing about being invisible for so long. You start seeing everything. You notice details others ignore. You learn to stand still while the world reveals its secrets. I thought I could live like that forever, tucked into the background, surviving on crumbs of acknowledgement. But when I opened that album, staring at the blank spaces where I should have been, I felt something break. Because being erased is worse than being hated. At least hate means you're visible. At least hate admits you exist. That night, I closed the album, slid it back into the drawer, and whispered to myself, "Never again." And yet, a week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Gold lettering, heavy paper, my sister Emily's wedding invitation. It wasn't addressed to my sister Claire. It wasn't even warm. It simply read, "Miss Claire Dawson." And as I held it in my hand, I wondered if this was an invitation or a reminder that I would never truly belong. The envelope sat on my kitchen table like a dare, heavy ivory paper, gold lettering pressed into its surface. The kind of stationery that announces prestige before you even open it. I turned it over in my hands more than once, my fingers tracing the swirling initials on the seal. E and J, Emily and Jasper. When I finally slid the letter opener through, the card inside shimmered in the afternoon light. The Dawson and Langley families cordially invite you to the wedding of Emily Dawson and Jasper Langley. The date, the venue, the reminder that everything in my family's world was grand, polished, and picture-perfect. But what struck me most wasn't the opulence. It was the way my name was written. Not to my sister Claire, not even Dear Claire. Just 3 words, Miss Claire Dawson. A title for strangers. A title for someone they tolerated, not someone they loved. I set the invitation down, my stomach tightening with a familiar ache. Before I could decide what to do, my phone lit up. It was my mother. "Claire," she said, her tone clipped and efficient, as if this were a business call. "I assume you received the invitation." "I did." "Good. Then you'll be there. Please try to dress appropriately this time. It's a formal wedding, not one of your gallery nights. The Langley family is very important. Do not embarrass us." I swallowed, letting the silence stretch. "You don't have to worry," I said quietly. "I'll blend in, like wallpaper." She didn't laugh. She never did at my sarcasm. "Remember, Claire, You're still representing us, even if you think you aren't." And then she hung up. "No, I love you. No, I'm proud of you." Just another order. Another reminder that in her world, I was an accessory she could barely tolerate. I thought the insult was over. But a few hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Emily. "Hey, sis. So excited you're coming. Quick favor. Would you mind snapping a few pictures during the reception? Nothing fancy, just candids. You've got the best eye, and it'd be super meaningful. And of course, free. Haha." I stared at the message, my chest tightening. Even on the most important day of her life, she saw me not as her sister, but as free labor, the family photographer, the one they could exploit because saying no meant enduring guilt trips and lectures. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could almost hear my mother's voice if I refused. "Selfish, ungrateful, you never do anything for your sister." But something in me had hardened. I typed, slowly, deliberately. "I appreciate the thought, Emily. But this time, I'd like to attend as a guest." I hit send. The 3 dots that usually meant a reply never appeared. Hours passed. Emily never wrote back. For the first time in my life, I had drawn a line. Small, perhaps invisible to them. But to me, it felt monumental. That night, I sat by my window, sipping tea as the city glowed beyond the glass. My laptop pinged with a new email. At first, I thought it was another reminder from Emily or my mother. But when I opened it, my breath caught. "Dear Ms. Dawson," it began, "we are pleased to inform you that your photography has been selected for the Clarion Gallery Spring Showcase. Your work displays a rare, unflinching eye. We would be honored to feature your collection." I read the words 3 times, my hands trembling. After years of silence, rejection, and erasure, here it was, recognition, not from my family, from the world, from people who actually saw me. I leaned back in my chair, letting the tears prick my eyes. For once, I wasn't the forgotten daughter. For once, I was more than their shadow. The Boston Grand Hotel gleamed like a shrine to wealth. Marble floors polished so bright, they reflected the chandeliers. Waiters in white gloves, carrying champagne flutes that sparkled like liquid gold. Guests in gowns worth thousands moved through the lobby, greeting each other with air kisses and rehearsed laughter. I walked in alone, my emerald dress brushing my calves, my heart pounding harder than my heels against the floor. For a moment, I let myself imagine, just for a moment, that maybe this time would be different. Maybe they would seat me with family. Maybe I would belong, even for one night. The attendant with the clipboard smiled politely. "Miss Dawson, this way, please." She didn't lead me into the grand ballroom, where 200 guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers. Instead, she guided me down a narrow hallway, past the gilded doors, toward the far corner near a glowing red exit sign. "Here you are." My table was round, small, and set for one. No candles, no menus, no centerpiece, just a flimsy card with my name on it, and a plate in the center, holding the same dry bread I had seen earlier. It was as if they had gone out of their way to remind me of my place, close enough to hear the music, far enough to never matter. I sat down slowly, smoothing the fabric of my dress across my lap, and tried to steady my breath. A violin began its soft melody inside the ballroom. Guests applauded. The sound floated toward me like I was eavesdropping on someone else's life. And then I felt her. My mother glided toward me in silver satin, pearls shining against her collarbone. To the crowd, she was grace personified. To me, she was judgment in heels. She bent slightly, her smile delicate, her voice sharp enough to cut. "I see you found your place," she whispered, gesturing toward the bread. "It's appropriate, simple, humble, just like you." She didn't wait for a reply. She never did. She drifted back into the light of the ballroom, leaving me in the shadows with her words. I stared at the bread. My jaw tightened. I thought about every time I had swallowed their insults. Not tonight. The music swelled again, and that was when Emily appeared. My sister, the glowing bride, satin and lace cascading like a river of light. Her smile rehearsed for the cameras, her posture flawless. Guests gasped and clapped as she moved through the room, pausing for compliments, soaking in every ounce of admiration. Eventually, her eyes landed on me. She walked closer, her gown sweeping across the carpet like a tide I couldn't escape. She stopped at my table, tilted her head, and lowered her voice so only I could hear. "Charming dress, Claire. Very minimalist. I always admired how you make everything look so affordable. It's a gift, really. You can take the most ordinary thing and make it look even cheaper." Her smile was soft, her tone sweet, but her words landed like knives. I met her eyes, but said nothing. Silence can be sharper than an insult. She lingered for a moment, expecting me to flinch, then turned gracefully and drifted back into her perfect world. I exhaled slowly. The orchestra played. Laughter rang out. The ballroom sparkled. And I sat alone at the forgotten table, not with shame, but with clarity. Because here's the truth. Sometimes being excluded shows you more than being included ever could. Sometimes the corner seat gives you the clearest view of the stage. Have you ever been placed somewhere so far from the center that you realized you were never truly welcome? Think about that. Think about what you would have done in my place. I reached into my purse. My fingers curled around the small black USB waiting at the bottom. Smooth, cold, heavy. I held it in my palm, hidden beneath the tablecloth, and whispered to myself again. Not tonight. 3 weeks before the wedding, I had already seen something I could never unsee. It was at the engagement party, high above the city, in a rooftop lounge overlooking the harbor. Everyone was celebrating, toasting champagne, posing for photos. Emily had insisted I bring my camera. "Just for candids," she'd said, her voice all sugar. "You've got the best eye, and it'll make Mom so happy." So I showed up, camera slung across my shoulder, trying to stay out of the spotlight. That's what I was good at, being invisible. Most of the night, I snapped blurry moments through crystal glassware, children running between tables, Jasper shaking hands with men who treated him like royalty. But near the end of the evening, as fireworks lit the sky outside, I slipped back into the empty lounge to adjust my camera settings. That's when I saw her, Emily. She stood near the bar, her phone glowing in her hand. Her face wasn't radiant then. It was tight, drawn, restless. She typed quickly, lips pressed together, then paused to read. And as she turned slightly, I saw the message light up across her screen. "Tonight, one last time." My bed, not Jasper's. My stomach dropped. Before I could look away, she slipped her phone into her clutch and headed for the private elevator. Instinct told me to follow. I didn't plan to confront her. I just needed to know. 2 floors down, I stepped quietly into the parking garage, my breath shallow in the cold air, and there it was, her silver coupe, parked alone at the far end. A few minutes later, a black SUV pulled up beside it. The driver stepped out, tall, polished, too familiar, one of Jasper's closest business contacts. Then, Emily emerged from her car and walked straight into his arms. No hesitation, no shame. The kiss was slow, practiced, like something that had happened 100 times before. My camera lifted before I realized I was holding it. I switched to video mode, pressed record, and captured the truth they thought would stay hidden in the dark. When they disappeared into the back seat, I stopped filming. I didn't need more. The truth was already enough. I told no one. Not Jasper. Not my father. Not even a friend. Part of me thought, maybe it wasn't my place. Maybe I should keep silent, as always. But silence has a way of festering, and deep down, I knew this would not stay buried forever. And then came the recording. 1 week before the wedding, I went to my parents' house, hoping, foolishly, that my father might listen if I spoke to him privately. But before I could reach him, I overheard voices drifting from the sunroom. My mother, my sister. "Don't worry," my mother said, calm and precise. "The properties, the vineyard house, the shares, they're all moved into your name. Your father has no idea." "Good," Emily replied. "After the wedding, I want everything set in motion. I'll hold the estate, the accounts, the trust, all of it. And Claire, she won't last long. She's always been nothing but background." Their laughter chilled me more than their words. I pulled out my phone, pressed record, and captured every syllable. That was the moment I stopped being silent. But even as I prepared, someone was watching me. The night before the wedding, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. One line appeared on the screen. "If you play that video tomorrow, you'll regret it." No name, no clue, just a warning heavy enough to shake my hands. I almost deleted everything. Almost. But when I sat at that lonely table by the exit, bread staring back at me like a cruel joke, I knew what I had to do. So, when a coordinator asked me to help test the slideshow on the ballroom laptop, because of course the family photographer could handle it, I smiled politely. And while they looked away, I slid the black USB into the port and replaced their happy montage with something else, something real. I closed the laptop gently, my reflection staring back at me in the black screen. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible, and the truth was waiting. The ballroom shimmered with gold light as waiters cleared plates and refilled champagne glasses. Guests leaned back in their chairs, satisfied after hours of orchestrated perfection. At the head table, Emily sat glowing, Jasper's arm resting lightly at her side, their smiles as polished as the crystal stemware. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, his voice smooth, practiced. "Before we conclude this evening, we have one final toast. A few words from the bride's sister, Claire Dawson." My stomach tightened. For years, I had been left out, erased, silenced. Now every eye turned toward me. The polite curiosity in their faces burned hotter than any spotlight. I rose slowly from my chair in the shadows and walked toward the stage. My emerald dress brushed against the carpet. My heels echoed faintly, swallowed by the hush that spread through the room. I carried no glass. I held no notes. I didn't even force a smile. "I appreciate the opportunity," I began, my voice even, steady. "But I won't be offering a toast tonight." Murmurs rippled across the room. Emily's smile faltered, her hands tightening around Jasper's sleeve. My mother stiffened in her chair, pearls gleaming like armor. "I didn't come here to offer blessings or rehearsed words," I continued. "I came with something else, something overdue." From my purse, I pulled the black USB, simple, unassuming, yet heavier than any diamond in the room. I handed it to the technician beside the stage. "Please," I said softly, "play this." The lights dimmed. The screen behind the head table flickered to life. For a moment, silence stretched so long I could hear my own pulse. And then the first image appeared. Emily's silver coupe, A dark parking garage. A man stepping out of a black SUV. Their embrace. Their kiss. Gasps broke across the ballroom like shattered glass. Hands flew to mouths. Chairs scraped against marble as guests leaned forward. On the screen, my sister disappeared into the back seat of her car, with a man who was not her groom. Emily shot to her feet, her face drained of color. "Turn it off!" she shouted, voice cracking. "That's private. That's not real." But the video continued. The screen went dark, replaced by audio. My mother's voice, calm, calculated. The properties, the vineyard house, the shares, they're all moved into your name. Your father has no idea. Then Emily's laughter followed, sharp and confident. "Good. After the wedding, I'll hold everything. And Claire? She's always been nothing but background." The ballroom froze. Forks clinked to the floor. Jasper's face hardened, his knuckles white as he gripped the tablecloth. My father stared at the screen as if seeing his family for the first time. I stood to the side, my hands folded calmly. The truth was no longer mine alone. It filled the room, undeniable, and then my phone buzzed. I glanced down. An email notification. The sender's name made my breath catch. Cole Maddox. The subject line. "In case she denies it." My hands trembled as I opened it. Attached was an audio file. His voice, clear, low. "She told me it was one last night. She said Jasper was just a step toward power. She laughed at how easy it was. I recorded everything. If she tries to twist the story, use this." I looked up. Emily's eyes darted wildly across the room, searching for control that no longer existed. But the screen was still glowing. The guests were still staring. And I knew the night was only beginning to unravel. The screen glowed once more, and with it came a voice the guests did not recognize. But I did. Cole Maddox, smooth, confident, unshaken. She told me I was just a distraction, that Jasper was the real prize. She said marrying him meant power, property, reputation. I was only ever a placeholder. And she laughed about how easy it was to fool everyone. Gasps spread across the ballroom like wildfire. Guests clutched pearls, exchanged frantic glances, whispered behind hands. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others stared at Emily as if seeing her for the first time. On screen, Cole's voice continued, steady as a gavel. "I have every message, every call, every plan. If she denies it, I'll release them all." The video ended. The screen went black. Silence fell, heavier than the chandeliers hanging above us. Jasper rose slowly from his chair. His face was pale, but his jaw was hard, set like stone. He looked at Emily, his bride, his supposed partner, and for a fleeting second, something like sorrow flickered in his eyes. Then it vanished. He reached for his left hand, slid the platinum ring off his finger, and held it in the air. "I loved a lie in a white dress," he said quietly, but the words carried like thunder through the room. He set the ring gently on the linen tablecloth. The sound was soft, almost tender, but it echoed louder than any shout. Emily's lips parted. "Jasper, wait." He didn't. He turned, walked away from the head table, his parents rising beside him. Douglas Langley, a man whose voice had swayed boardrooms, now spoke with the force of finality. "This marriage is void. Effective immediately, our family severs all personal and business ties with the Dawsons. Any pending negotiations are withdrawn." The declaration struck harder than any scandal. Guests gasped audibly. Investors, bankers, socialites, all knew what it meant. Not just shame, ruin. My mother rose, half out of her chair, trembling. "Douglas, please. This is a misunderstanding." But Douglas silenced her with a look sharp enough to cut. He placed a steady hand on his son's shoulder and led him out of the ballroom. Elizabeth Langley followed, graceful even in disgrace. The doors shut behind them, and with their exit, the last veneer of perfection crumbled. The ballroom erupted. Guests pushed back chairs, some whispering furiously, others hurrying to collect their coats. The polished orchestra sat frozen, bows hovering over strings, unwilling to play another note. And there, at the center of it all, Emily stood, shaking. Her perfect curls had wilted, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She turned slowly, her eyes searching, her breath ragged, until they locked on me. Her voice cracked, rising above the chaos. "Claire, this is your fault. You've destroyed everything." People turned toward me, some with pity, some with shock, some with quiet, almost guilty admiration. Emily's voice grew shrill. "Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted? To humiliate me? To tear down your own family?" I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the silence stand taller than her screams. Because silence, for once, was mine to wield. Her words hung in the air, trembling, desperate. But I didn't answer. Not then, not ever. The days after the wedding felt like a storm that refused to pass. Newspapers ran with headlines. Socialite wedding ends in scandal. Blogs plastered Emily's photo beside words like affair and betrayal. My mother's voice, captured on audio, replayed across social media, until strangers in cities I'd never been to repeated her cruelty like a warning. The Dawson name, once whispered with admiration, became something else entirely. Phone calls that used to arrive daily fell silent. Invitations disappeared. My mother, Evelyn, who once commanded every luncheon and charity board, found herself quietly erased. Her resignation letters arrived one by one, wrapped in politeness but thick with rejection. My father retreated into himself. Contracts dissolved, investors pulled out. The weight of his empire cracked beneath the truth he had ignored for decades. He never blamed me, but he never forgave himself either. And Emily, she disappeared. Modeling agencies cut ties. Sponsorships vanished. Even her closest friends stopped answering her calls. For someone who had built her entire life on being adored, the silence was unbearable. I didn't seek her out. I didn't need to. Because one rainy afternoon, she came to me. I was in my studio, rinsing developer trays. The smell of chemicals and coffee thick in the air. The knock was soft, hesitant, followed by a pause that felt like regret. I opened the door, and there she was, Emily, my sister. Her perfect curls were gone, her makeup smudged by rain. The designer coat she wore sagged on her shoulders, soaked through. She looked smaller somehow, stripped of the spotlight she had once lived for. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. Her voice cracked, thin from crying, or maybe from finally telling the truth. "I have nothing left to lie for." For a long moment, I just stood there. Part of me expected to feel triumph, but what I felt was heavier, quieter. Grief, maybe. Not for her lies, but for the years we had lost. "I'm not asking for anything," she added quickly. I need to start over. I'll do anything. Clean. Run errands. You don't even have to look at me." I stepped aside. Not enough to welcome her, but enough to let her choose. She walked in, dripping water onto the hardwood floor, her eyes darting across my photographs pinned to the wall. Lives of strangers. Moments of truth. The very things she had spent years mocking. I handed her a mop. "Start there." She nodded. No protest, no entitlement, just quiet acceptance. Forgiveness didn't arrive that night. Maybe it never would. But consequences had, and with them, the faint outline of change. Weeks later, I stood in a gallery bathed in warm light. My first solo exhibition. Portraits of truth. Faces lined with time, hands folded in grief, smiles caught mid-recovery. No filters, no perfection. Just people, seen as they were. Critics walked the room. Collectors whispered. And for once, they weren't looking past me. They were looking through my lens, seeing the world as I had always seen it. On the far wall hung a photograph I had taken the night after the wedding. My mother, Evelyn, standing under an awning, rain streaking down glass between us. Her posture proud, her eyes unreadable. The caption beneath it read, "Sometimes silence says enough." I didn't need revenge anymore. What I needed was freedom. And freedom came not from destroying them, but from finally refusing to let them destroy me. Because here is the truth. Love, when it is real, heals. And forgiveness, not the kind that excuses cruelty, but the kind that frees you from carrying it, becomes the only way to keep living. I wasn't ready to forgive them yet, but I was ready to let go of hate. And that was enough. So I'll ask you this. If you had been in my place, sitting at that table with dry bread on your plate, would you have stayed silent, or would you have stood up and let the truth burn?